The word sliced through the cabin air like a cold, flawless blade, cruel and casual enough to make the entire first-class section falter for a single breath. "Sweetheart, you don't look like you belong up here." The voice was syrupy. Sweet, but the scent of mockery clung to it so strongly that anyone standing near could almost smell it. It came from the mouth of Brenda Collins, 42 years old, a veteran flight attendant of North Star Airlines, a woman who treated first class as her personal territory, a space where she believed she had the authority to decide who deserved to exist in it and who didn't. To her, the woman standing before her, Lauren Whitfield, was nothing more than a misplaced passenger, out of place, out of standard, out of alignment with the image of power Brenda thought she understood. Lauren didn't move. Not because she was shocked, but because she had heard variations of that sentence her entire life. What Brenda didn't know was this: Lauren's calm wasn't resignation. It was a storm long used to sleeping quietly. But when awakened at the right moment, it could strip the entire sky clean. The warm yellow cabin light washed over Lauren's face, highlighting the tired shadows under her eyes, after 3 days of closed-door negotiations in Frankfurt, where she had just finalized a deal, worth nearly $1 billion a deal, that would push Whitfield Technologies into the top 3 most influential cybersecurity companies in America. But none of that showed on her now. No luxury jewelry, no power suit, no elegant high heels, just a soft black tracksuit, her hair neatly tied back, and a hand-crafted leather briefcase that had followed her through hundreds of business trips. And it was that simplicity that made Brenda look at her the way people who believe they have the right to judge others always look from above, scrutinizing, evaluating. "Seat 1A, Lauren said, holding out her boarding pass. Her voice was low and rough from lack of sleep, yet every word carried a metallic sharpness. Brenda didn't look at the ticket, not even a glance. Her eyes slid down Lauren's figure, stopping at her white sneakers, then curling into a half-smile, as if she had just caught a small joke. "Economy's right behind you," she added, dropping her voice into its sweetest, most poisonous register. "A lot of people get lost up here. Don't worry." The word sweetheart landed like a slap, less a term of endearment than a deliberate strike. It didn't hurt Lauren. It sharpened her. Her heartbeat changed, not faster, not louder, but steady in the way of people who have been underestimated their entire lives, yet hold the real power in their hands. Lauren lifted the ticket again. 1A. On the ticket. And in the system. Brenda let out a small laugh, the kind of laugh born from blind certainty, not verification. The manifest says, "This seat belongs to a platinum elite passenger, Mr. Garrett Miller." She stressed the word elite as if Lauren could never belong to such a group. And right then, Garrett appeared, a heavy-set man, panting from rushing his rumpled suit, the kind only unimportant men wore with confidence. Brenda's demeanor flipped like a light switch. Her smile widened. Her tone softened, her entire posture warmed. "Oh, Mr. Miller, we were just resolving a small mix-up. This passenger accidentally sat in your seat." Garrett looked at Lauren, then at seat 1A. For a fleeting second, he could have said, "Maybe she's right." But the fear of inconvenience outweighed the pull of justice. He only shrugged and stayed silent. Cowardice can be uglier than prejudice. Lauren straightened. "No. One word, gold cold clean. No raised voice, no tremble." Brenda flinched. Someone like Lauren in her mind was not supposed to push back, but Lauren did not step aside. I bought this seat. I'm not moving. Brenda narrowed her eyes, her smile sharpening as if preparing a strike. Then I'll call the captain. Lauren said nothing. No arguing, no pleading. Someone like her never fought small battles with small people. But Brenda, calling the captain, that was when the rules changed. Captain Robert Hayes appeared, a 55-year-old man with a stomach softened by long hours in the cockpit eyes, once sharp, now dulled with fatigue. He looked at Brenda, then at Lauren, then at the tablet Brenda handed him, as if it were unquestionable truth. The manifest shows 1A for Mr. Miller, he said. We have one seat left, 31B. If you refuse, we'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft. He didn't check the system, didn't ask again, didn't look at her ticket, didn't question anything. To him, truth was whatever made a decision easy, not what made it right. First class went silent. A few passengers looked down, ashamed even though it wasn't their fault. Some watched Lauren with shallow curiosity, and in seat 2, see a phone lifted quietly. Ben Carter, 29, freelance journalist, had recognized Lauren the moment she boarded. He knew who she was, and he knew what Brenda was doing could burn a career to ashes. He hit record. Lauren looked at Brenda, then at the captain, then at seat 31. B, where a woman was FaceTiming loudly, and a student had already removed his shoes. In that moment, she didn't feel humiliation. She saw data, a chain of behaviors, a perfect sample, a rotten system, a discriminatory pattern she had studied when developing anti-bias algorithms in artificial intelligence. She knew she couldn't win this skirmish, this tiny battle in a cramped airplane cabin. But she knew she would win the real war, the one fought with power contracts and truth. So she picked up her briefcase. She didn't say another word, didn't look back. She turned and walked down the aisle amid whispers and averted gazes. The walk of shame, people called it. Lauren called it something else, an activation. Every step she placed on the aircraft carpet brought her closer to her decision. They would pay for this. They thought they had diminished her. They had no idea they had just cornered one of the sharpest minds in the technology industry, leaving her no option but to retaliate with everything she had. Seat 31B was narrow, hot, loud. Lauren sat. The smell of shoes, food, and old cabin air swirled around her. But inside her mind, everything went silent. She unlocked her phone. The crew announced airplane mode. She ignored it. She knew she had a few minutes before the signal disappeared completely, and a few minutes were more than enough for someone like her. Her fingers moved quickly, steady and precise. She sent an encrypted message to her COO, Daniel Cho, Phoenix Protocol, execute immediately. The message went through, and just as the signal began to fade, Daniel replied, "Understood. Are you safe?" Lauren didn't write much. Safe, humiliated, handle it. One word handle held more weight to people like Daniel than an entire 3-page directive. Lauren leaned back. She closed her eyes, not to rest, but to mark this moment, the exact second North Star Airlines believed they had won. What they didn't know was they had just triggered the wrong person at the wrong time. She had no idea Brenda was gloating up in first class. She had no idea Captain Hayes was sipping coffee before takeoff, convinced he'd resolved the issue. She had no idea Garrett was settling into her seat, pleased he had avoided trouble. But she knew one thing. This was not the end of the story. It was only the opening line. When the North Star Airlines aircraft vibrated, gently signaling imminent takeoff, Lauren Whitfield opened her eyes. Economy class was darker, tighter, poorer, but in that shadowed space, something was glowing, Not anger, but something sharper and more strategic, a state of absolute clarity. The moment the wheels lifted off the ground was the same moment she shed the role of an insulted passenger and returned to who she truly was, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar technology empire, a woman who had cost more than a few corporate chairmen their jobs with nothing more than a single email. The student on her left had begun to snore softly, while the woman on her right kept FaceTiming, proudly showing off her new nails to a household full of people shouting over each other. The air was cramped and noisy, a mix of cheap gum and garlic onion snacks. It was the kind of environment Brenda Collins believed would crush Lauren's dignity. But what Brenda didn't understand was that people like Lauren, those who had climbed from the lowest rungs of society, never let temporary surroundings define their worth. Humiliation didn't weaken Lauren. It sharpened her. She pulled out her phone despite the reminder to switch to airplane mode. The signal was fading, stretched thin like a thread about to snap. But for Lauren, a few seconds were enough to alter the fate of an entire airline. Her hands moved quickly, every tap like a needle driving straight into the arteries of a system. A second message went out, encrypted at the highest level to her head of legal initiate review. Flight 4827. Names Brenda Collins. Captain Robert Hayes, passenger Garrett Miller. Possible discrimination, forced displacement ticket override. Prepare litigation options. The message vanished just as her screen dropped to a single bar of signal and then slipped into the silence of airplane mode. But it was enough. The two most powerful brains inside Whitfield Tech had received the alarm. Lauren closed her eyes, her breathing steady and unshaken. Above her, Brenda was probably beginning to serve cold-pressed juice to first-class passengers, certain she had just taught that out-of-place girl a lesson. But if Brenda could see through the cabin walls down to seat 31B, through Lauren's calm exterior, she would see a far more frightening truth. That lesson was already turning back toward her, and it would flatten her long before she understood what was happening. A ding echoed from the upper cabin, signaling drink service. From the economy speakers, Brenda's voice poured out, bright and sweet, but Lauren could hear the poison in every syllable. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard North Star Airlines. Thank you for flying with us today." Lauren opened her eyes. That announcement no longer stung her. It was simply a reminder that the kind of power Brenda thought she had only lived inside that cheap microphone. The real power lived inside Lauren's silent phone, inside contracts, money law, and data, and she knew how to weaponize every piece of it. Beside her, the FaceTiming woman glanced at Lauren with mild curiosity. Lauren didn't look back, but if she had, that woman would have seen something new in her eyes, the shift carried by people who are about to ignite a battle no one sees coming. A flame had been lit, not loud or violent, but deep, controlled, and enduring. The kind of fire carried by someone who had risen from obscurity to absolute influence. The drink cart began to move down the aisle. Dim lights, the clink of plastic cups, the crack of aluminum can tabs. Brenda reached row 30, then 31. When the cart stopped beside Lauren's row, she flicked her eyes toward Lauren for exactly 1 second. A tiny glance, quick but pointed enough to display her triumph. Lauren saw the satisfaction clearly. "Something to drink, Ma'am," Brenda asked the woman on Lauren's right in a honey-coated voice. Then she served the student on Lauren's left. But when she reached Lauren herself, she pushed the cart forward, without pausing, deliberately, intentionally, without even pretending to look. Lauren didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. She simply tilted her head slightly, as if filing away one more data point into her internal archive. A small act, but an essential tile in the mosaic. Everything was being recorded by her eyes, by the audio Ben Carter was quietly capturing, by an entire corporation standing behind her. Brenda believed she had just hurt Lauren. In reality, she had likely doubled the legal payout the airline would owe. Lauren opened her laptop. The sound of her typing was not the sound of someone working. It was the sound of war drums. She began drafting a document that would later be regarded as an industry standard in technology, the Zero Tolerance Vendor Conduct Protocol. Every sentence was a declaration of war. Any partner engaging in discriminatory behavior toward Whitfield Tech personnel will be terminated immediately with contract penalties. All complaints will be logged and delivered directly to the Internal Ethics Committee. No exceptions. No negotiation. No leniency. Between the gentle snores of the student and the laughter from the FaceTiming woman, a $10 million policy was written. Above them, Brenda still believed she had won. Captain Hayes was pleased with himself for maintaining order. Garrett Miller was stretching his legs in Lauren's seat, sipping undeserved champagne. But none of them knew a tidal wave was forming, one powerful enough to erase all three from the aviation industry in a single afternoon. As the plane began its descent, the announcement chimed. We will be landing in Boston shortly. Lauren closed her laptop. The reflection in her eyes was a muted metallic glint. Her phone signal returned. Immediately it buzzed violently. Messages poured in from Daniel Phoenix Protocol executed. VP of North Star is trying to reach you. They know. Another message, legal team ready. Full documentation underway. A third standing by at gate. Lauren took a slow, steady breath. Not from fatigue, but because she understood that the moment she stepped off this aircraft, everything would change, not just for Brenda, not just for Captain Hayes, but for North Star Airlines as a whole. And when the aircraft wheels touched down on the runway, the trembling she felt did not come from the landing, but from a simple truth. Brenda thought she was handling a troublesome passenger, but she had just provoked the one person she should never have touched. Lauren rose when the seatbelt light switched off, not hurried, not angry, but composed. As she stepped into the jet bridge, Ben Carter in Seat 2C watched her go. He knew that the moment those white sneakers touched the carpet of Logan Airport, the story he had recorded would no longer be a small act of discrimination on a plane. It would become a weapon of truth, one capable of collapsing an entire system. And Lauren would be the one to pull the trigger. When the aircraft door swung open, a rush of cold air from Boston, Logan's corridor swept across Lauren's face, as if trying to strip away every compressed breath she had held throughout the flight. But Lauren did not sway. She stepped out with the poise of someone who had fallen to the bottom of a well and climbed all the way back up through sheer force of will. No confusion, no hurt. Only a cold, focused precision that seemed to pull the very air taut around her. Passengers hurried ahead, suitcases rattling conversations blending with the rolling thunder of luggage wheels. But at the far end of the hall, standing apart from the crowd, were two men waiting, and they looked nothing like regular travelers. One wore a sharp black suit with a deep navy tie, his eyes razor-sharp behind thin metal frames, Daniel Cho, Chief Operating Officer of Whitfield Tech. The other was his polar opposite, pale face, sweat-soaked shirt, lips trembling with tension. Richard Porter, Vice President of Partner Relations for North Star Airlines. Their contrast felt like two electrical poles waiting for a detonation. Richard moved first, forcing a smile that failed before it even formed. "Dr. Whitfield Lauren, I am truly very, very sorry for everything that happened on the flight." His voice quivered like an over-tightened guitar string. Lauren looked down at Richard's outstretched hand, a hand that shook as if clinging to its last chance. She did not take it. Her gaze passed over it, then rose to his face, cold but not cruel calm, yet heavy with authority. "Mr. Porter Lauren," said her voice, neither raised nor sharp, but carrying weight like stone. What happened on that flight was not a little misunderstanding. It was a sequence of discriminatory actions, deliberate humiliation, and the dismissal of a passenger's identity. Richard swallowed hard. Daniel stood behind Lauren without speaking, but the look in his eyes made Richard feel as though he stood between two predators, one baring its teeth, the other silent, but far more dangerous. "We want to resolve everything," Richard stammered. We will review disciplinary measures for the employees." Daniel cut in his tone, soft but slicing like a thin blade. "When you say review, how exactly is that defined? A warning email? A 2-hour soft skills workshop? Do you believe that is enough to repair systemic discriminatory behavior that happened under your oversight?" Richard's face drained of color. Sweat pooled on his brow. Lauren remained still, her dark eyes studying his every twitch. "Daniel," she said. With just that one word, Daniel fell silent instantly, stepping back half a pace like an officer receiving a command from a general. Lauren turned to Richard, her voice shifting completely now, forged in heat unbendable. "You want to resolve this fine? Then bring me the entire crew involved. I want to see them. Right now." Richard blanched. Now Lauren nodded slowly, leaving no room for negotiation. "You have 10 minutes." And with 3 simple words, she sent a vice president of a major airline running as if fire were chasing him. Daniel stepped closer. Beneath his usual disciplined reserve, there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Lauren, are you all right?" Her expression did not change, but her reply stopped Daniel cold. "Daniel, I do not need to be all right. I need to be exact." It was a sentence both beautiful and merciless, the kind spoken by people who fight not to survive, but to rewrite the rules themselves. 10 minutes later, the conference room door beside them opened. Richard entered with 2 people, Brenda Collins and Captain Robert Hayes. Brenda looked as if her glamour had been peeled away. Makeup gone hair messy, eyes red, still trying to hold on to her arrogance while her hands twisted nervously. Hayes, the same man who had stepped from the cockpit with such confidence earlier, now looked like a cracked statue. Tense jaw, bewildered, unsure what storm he had walked into. Both of them stopped in front of Lauren without realizing they were standing before the very woman they had decided did not belong in first class. If Brenda had known, she would never have opened her mouth. If Hayes had known, he would never have threatened to invite her off the aircraft. Brenda spoke first, her voice brittle and stiff. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. I was only following procedure." Lauren cut her off instantly. "One sentence, one blade. You violated the first procedure discriminatory judgment based on appearance." Brenda froze. Lauren continued, not raising her voice, but each word falling like a hammer. "You violated the second procedure refusal to verify a valid ticket." Brenda's lips parted. "I silence." Daniel interjected, his voice deeper and heavier than before. "You will speak when you are asked." Hayes, who once thought Lauren was nothing more than a troublesome passenger, was now the one trembling the most. He looked from Lauren to Daniel to Richard, as if searching desperately for an exit. But every door was sealed, and the person holding the key stood directly in front of him. Lauren stepped forward, the distance between her and Hayes now little more than an arm's reach. "Captain Hayes," she said, her voice low yet commanding. "You forced me out of a seat I purchased. You did not check the system. You did not verify the ticket. You did not consider anything I said." Hayes swallowed. I followed the manifest." "That is, you followed bias," Lauren corrected him. "Not protocol." The room went silent. Richard stood behind them with his eyes closed like a man praying. Brenda turned pale. Hayes lowered his head. But Lauren was not finished. She raised her hand. Daniel placed a tablet into it. On the screen was the partnership contract between Whitfield Tech and North Star Airlines, a contract Lauren herself had signed 3 years earlier. Inside that contract was one clause that North Star's legal team clearly never bothered to examine, a clause Lauren had added while remembering every time she or her employees had been subjected to discrimination while traveling for work. Clause 14. If any employee of North Star Airlines engages in discriminatory behavior or insults personnel or representatives of Whitfield Tech, the contract may be terminated immediately with a penalty of 15% of the previous year's contract value. That penalty amounted to $4 million. Lauren held the screen in front of Hayes and Brenda. "Your actions," she said, "trigger this clause." Brenda's jaw dropped open. Hayes froze like ice. Richard trembled. And Daniel simply watched them, with the look of someone who had known from the moment Brenda said sweetheart that their fate had already been sealed. Lauren closed the tablet and set it on the table. "Let me make this perfectly clear," she continued. "Both of you will be terminated. Not next week, not tomorrow. Right now." A strangled sound escaped Brenda. "No, you can't. I can," Lauren replied. "And I am." Hayes tried to salvage a scrap of dignity. "This is not fair." Lauren tilted her head, her gaze softening for the briefest instant. "Fairness is what you denied me." The sentence, simple, sharp, and devastating, sucked the air from the room. Brenda began to cry. Hayes bowed his head. Richard stared at his watch, as if counting down the last seconds of his career. And Lauren stood in the middle of it all, not triumphant, not gloating, wrapped only in the quiet certainty of justice. Yet deep within her eyes, something moved, a mix of exhaustion and resolve, because Lauren knew this was merely the beginning. What she was about to fight was not 2 misbehaving employees, but an entire system ready to shield them. She turned, picked up her leather bag, and walked out of the conference room. Daniel followed beside her, each step like an entry into the battlefield that had just opened. Behind them, Brenda managed one last scream, her voice cracked and venomous. "You will regret this. I will make everyone know what kind of person you really are." Lauren paused for half a second. She did not turn. She did not respond. But Daniel saw her hand tighten around the bag's strap, the only sign that the words had pierced somewhere deep. What Brenda did not know, what she could never know, was that Lauren did not fear attacks. What Lauren feared was silence. And when the press stays silent for too long, it usually means they are preparing to throw someone into the fire. Lauren walked toward the exit. A security camera overhead blinked softly, capturing the moment she left the hallway, a moment that would later be seen as the precursor to a nationwide media explosion. The battle was no longer inside an airplane cabin. It had stepped into the real world, and Lauren knew the next chapter would not be easy. Not at all, When morning light spilled across Boston's skyline, Lauren Whitfield opened her eyes and felt an eerie stillness settle over the penthouse. Not peace, not relief, but the chilling quiet of a storm gathering behind a mountain range, ready to crash down at any moment. Her body was exhausted from days of travel, yet her mind was sharp, frighteningly sharp, because Lauren understood one thing with absolute clarity. People like Brenda Collins did not know how to lose, did not know how to take responsibility, did not know how to stay silent. They knew only one thing: how to create noise. Her phone buzzed on the table. Not one notification. 17. Lauren glanced over. Messages from legal, from Daniel, from department heads, from friends in the industry. She opened the first one and felt something tighten deep inside her. Daily Roar just published an article on the flight incident. You need to see this. Lauren tapped the link. The screen lit up, and instantly her heartbeat shifted direction, not from anger, but from the ruthless precision of being betrayed by a system she knew all too well, a media machine that never sided with truth unless truth generated clicks. The headline stood there, bold, black, and violent like a verdict. Arrogant black CEO fires entire flight crew over minor mix-up. The subheading below, sources claim. She shouted, "Do you know who I am?" before abusing her power to destroy their careers. A sentence that never existed. A script that was never real. An attack written with Brenda Collins's dirty fingerprints all over it. Lauren felt as if someone had yanked the floor out from under her. Not because she was weak, not because she hadn't expected backlash, but because she understood this: in this world, truth didn't outrun lies, and lies never needed evidence to spread. She scrolled down, and there it was, the familiar manipulation, a photo of Brenda standing outside a modest apartment, eyes red, clutching a tissue. Beside it, another image: Lauren at a tech conference, the stage lights hitting her face in a way that made her look severe and intimidating. Perfect for building the image of a ruthless corporate villain. Then came the fabricated quote, "I was just doing my job. When I noticed a seat mix-up, I tried to explain. But she started yelling, insulting me. I was terrified. No one has ever treated me that way. Each word like a dull blade, not sharp enough to cut clean, but jagged enough to tear crafted, to satisfy the public's favorite prejudice. And the public, like a pack of starving wolves, was feeding." Lauren scrolled to the comments. They were crawling with spiteful, ignorant, unthinking cruelty. People like her think they're above everyone. Typical power-hungry CEO abusing her status. I believe the flight attendant 100 times more. Black and rich always equals attitude. Boycott her company. None of it made Lauren angry. It made her cold. Cold enough to feel as though she stood in a snowstorm despite the warmth of the penthouse. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel calling. "Lauren, have you seen the article?" His voice was low, tight as a stretched wire. "Yes," Lauren replied, steady. Daniel exhaled sharply on the other end. "We need to respond immediately. We have to put out the fire before it spreads." "No," Lauren said. One word. Hard, heavy, final. No apologies. No clarifications. No reflex reactions. Lauren Daniel, pushed voice, softer but urgent. "Our stock is already down 3%. The numbers look worse by the minute." "We need a move," I know Lauren said, "and we will move. But not in the direction they want." When she set the phone down, her hand tightened against the edge of the table. Inside her, two forces collided: the discipline of a CEO who understood the rules of the game and the deep sense of betrayal of someone who had spent her entire life proving she deserved to be seen beyond the caricatures the world built around people like her. "Do you know who I am?" Brenda claimed. Lauren shouted that. But the truth was irrelevant. The world never cared who said what. It cared only about what it wanted to believe. Lauren turned on the TV. The news ticker was already running new scandal involving Whitfield Technologies. Of course, they said scandal, not fabrication. Commentators spoke in their polished, faux objective tones, disguising opportunism under the mask of journalism. They dissected Lauren's image, her career, her decisions not to report facts, but to mold a story compelling enough to spike ratings. Everything orbiting Lauren was no longer truth. It was the version of the truth the world found more entertaining. And then it happened, the one thing Lauren feared most, an email from a board member. "Lauren, we are facing a PR crisis. Perhaps we should consider a controlled apology. Another email, I understand how you feel, but the market doesn't. Please handle this quietly." Another email. "Let's not escalate. We need to maintain our partnership with North Star." Not a single person asked what actually happened. Not a single person asked, were you treated unfairly? Not a single person sided with truth. They sided with numbers, with fear, with whatever kept things calm. Lauren stood and walked toward the window. Morning Boston sparkled outside, but to her it looked blurry distant, as though she were viewing it through a pane of thick laboratory glass. A strange sense of cold detachment washed over her. Outside was the world. Inside was her. She thought of Brenda crying for the cameras, constructing the perfect victim narrative. She thought of Hayes trusting a manifest more than a human being. She thought of Garrett choosing comfort over conscience. But what suffocated Lauren was not them. It was how willingly the world believed them. Lauren knew exactly what was happening. This was not just smearing. This was the opening act of a narrative war, a battle in which the winner was not the one who was right, but the one with the more emotionally satisfying story. Brenda knew how to play the role of the vulnerable, fragile white victim. Tabloid media knew how to weaponize outrage. And the world knew how to punish women like Lauren simply because they refused to bow. Lauren sat down again. Her phone lit up. This time, it was not Daniel or the board. It was legal. Brenda and Hayes just filed complaints with the union. They claim wrongful termination and abuse of power. Lauren closed her eyes. 1 second. 2. She was not angry. She was simply accustomed. Accustomed to those who caused harm being the first to scream in pain. Accustomed to the truth needing 10 times the effort to prove itself. Accustomed to the world doubting honesty while embracing fear like wildfire. She opened her eyes. Something was rising in them. Not fire, not fury, but will. The will of someone who had spent her entire youth climbing into a seat the world never wanted her to sit in. The will of someone who knew that in a fight for justice, you sometimes had to let lies tighten their own noose. And she knew Brenda had just pulled the first thread. Lauren stood turned, picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. "Daniel," she said, "prepare a counter-strategy. I want every piece of data. I want Brenda's complaint history. I want Hayes's record. And I want every legal file on North Star's past discrimination cases." Daniel paused for a breath, then asked, "What are you planning to do?" Lauren looked straight into the mirror in the corner of the room. Reflected, there was a woman, not just powerful, but pushed to her final threshold, a CEO with nothing left to lose, but every ounce of justice to reclaim. "I am going to let them tell their story," Lauren said, her voice dropping into something that sounded almost like a vow. "And then I will tell the truth, and when the truth arrives, there will be nowhere left for them to hide." The phone went silent. Lauren stood there, her silhouette framed by the first light of day. Outside, a world was beginning to speak her name with anger and outrage. But inside, something else was quietly burning within her, a controlled fury, the kind that did not scream, the kind that rewrote the entire game. The storm had arrived. But Lauren did not tremble. She did not step back. She did not fear it, because she was the one preparing to hold the lightning in her hand. That night, Lauren's vast apartment lay under a wash of soft golden light, so quiet she could hear her own breathing. Boston outside was still glowing, still noisy, still rushing like every other night. But inside this space, every sound seemed swallowed by an invisible void, expanding in her chest. Lauren sat before her laptop, hands resting on the keyboard, yet unable to type a single word. Everything in her mind spun like a chaotic vortex. The twisted headlines, Brenda's fake sobs in her interview, the venomous comments calling her cruel, arrogant power, drunk and worse, the emails from the board urging her to tone it down, cool. The situation, consider a gentle apology to calm the market. The world did not care about the truth. It cared only about the story easiest to digest. And Brenda, by playing the victim, had crafted that story perfectly. Lauren leaned back and closed her eyes. No pain, no tears, no rage, just exhaustion. The kind only the strongest people understand, the exhaustion of having to constantly prove you are not what others invent about you. Her phone chimed. A single ping, a new email. Lauren opened her eyes. Something subtle shifted inside her, the instinct of someone who had built her entire career on information. Sender Ben Carter. Subject about North Star, Flight 4, 827. Important. Lauren sat upright. For the first time in hours, her heartbeat struck hard. She opened the email. "Dr. Whitfield, I am Ben Carter, the freelance journalist seated in 2C on this morning's flight. I witnessed the entire interaction between you, Flight Attendant Collins, and Captain Hayes. I know you were not at fault. I know you were treated unfairly. I also know the media is reporting false information. How do I know I recorded everything that happened? From the first sentence Brenda said to you to the moment you were forced out of your seat, I have attached a 30-second sample for verification. If you want the full 12-minute file, I am willing to provide it. Not for money, but because the truth deserves to be heard." Lauren felt her heart tighten, not from hurt, but from shock. Shock so sharp her hands paused above the keyboard. A recording. 12 minutes. Every word, every breath, every ounce of Brenda's contempt, every cold command from Hayes, every calm response from her, all of it. She opened the attached audio file, and instantly the room filled with Brenda's voice, sugary mocking, dripping with prejudice. "Sweetheart, you do not look like you belong in this cabin." Then Lauren's voice, tired but polite. "My seat is 1A. Then Brenda again, thick with disdain. "People like you are probably used to economy." Then Hayes, cold and dismissive. "You are in the wrong seat. Move to 31B or leave the plane." Lauren shot to her feet. Her ears burned, not from shame, not from hurt, but because for the first time since the incident, she had proof. Solid proof. Proof that could not be twisted. Proof that no tabloid could wash away. proof that no board member could dismiss with the words "it will blow over." The truth sat right there on her screen. Lauren pressed her hand to her lips, steadying her breath. She dialed Daniel. He answered on the first ring. "Lauren, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, not with weakness, but with something rising deep inside her, a mix of hope and fury. "I have a recording. A witness recorded everything." There was silence on the line. 1 second. 2. Then Daniel spoke low and resonant, like struck steel. "Lauren, we just won the war." The hailstorm in Lauren's mind stopped. The screaming noise of public opinion faded. The disorienting chaos loosened its grip. Only one clear line remained in her thoughts, blazing like a straight beam of light. The truth is coming back. She inhaled deeply. Set a meeting with the entire PR team, legal and cybersecurity. Tonight, in 1 hour, we shift into counterattack mode. "I will send a car," Daniel said. But Lauren did not hang up. Something inside her stirred. "Daniel, I'm afraid of something." "Afraid of what?" "That no matter how strong the truth is, people may still not want to believe it." Daniel paused for a long moment, then answered slowly, "Lauren, you do not need their belief. You need evidence. And now we have it." The words felt like steel sliding back into her spine, straightening her, fortifying her. She looked at the laptop again, at Brenda's tear-stained face, splashed across the tabloids, at the hateful comments, at the emails, begging her to bow. And then she looked at the audio file glowing on her screen, each tiny waveform clear, precise, undeniable. Lauren wrote a reply to Ben Carter. "Meet me immediately. You will be compensated fairly, and you will be credited. The truth will be brought to light. Send." She stood still for a moment, gazing at Boston's nightscape through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights reflected against her face, sharpening her eyes with a metallic gleam. The morning's exhaustion was gone. The suffocating injustice was gone. Only determination remained. A new storm was gathering. But this time, Lauren was the eye of it. Her phone buzzed. Ben replied, "On my way," bringing the full original recording. Lauren tightened her arm at her side. Outside the glass, hundreds of car lights flowed through the city like hot, moving veins. And she knew one thing: tomorrow, when that recording surfaced, everything would reverse. Nothing could stop it. Brenda Collins thought she had won. Captain Hayes thought they could bury the truth. The media thought they could write whatever story they wanted. The public thought they could judge without evidence. But they all forgot one thing. Lauren Whitfield was not just a CEO. She was someone who knew how to turn truth into a weapon. And this weapon, 12 minutes of audio, was about to bring every lie crashing down. Lauren grabbed her coat. She stepped out of the apartment. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the sound rang like a declaration. The battle has changed sides. Boston was silent that night, but the silence was no longer the calm before a storm. It was the silence before the world heard its first real truth. Tomorrow, everything would explode. When Lauren stepped into the conference room on the 41st floor of Whitfield Technologies headquarters, the air inside felt thick, as if an explosion had just gone off, and the smoke still hovered beneath the ceiling. 12 people sat around the table, the sharpest minds in PR, legal communications, and data analysis, and all of them were silent, their eyes locked on the woman who had just pushed the door open. Some looked worried, some tense, some appeared ready to rise to attention. Daniel Cho stood at the head of the table, an iPad tucked under his arm, his gaze sharp as a thin blade. When Lauren entered, he gave a small nod, Not a polite greeting, but the kind of acknowledgement a military officer gives his commander. Everyone is here. Lauren pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat. No one breathed loudly. No one shuffled. She placed her laptop on the dark wooden surface, opened it, and the 12-minute audio waveform appeared cool blue lines, holding enough power to make the entire room hold its breath. "Let's begin," Lauren said, her voice low and steady, not loud, yet strong enough to straighten every spine. First, she continued, "You all saw the article this morning." They nodded. Some eyes burned with anger, others with fear. "Good. I want you to remember that feeling," Lauren said, her gaze sharp and cold as frost. "Remember the anger. Remember the injustice. Remember the helpless silence you felt, watching a lie spread faster than the truth." Then she pressed play. The room filled with Brenda Collins's voice. "Sweetheart, you don't look like you belong up here." Through the conference room's high-quality speakers, the words sounded even more venomous and blatant than they had on the plane. Several members of the legal team exchanged stunned, furious looks. Then came Lauren's voice, tired but controlled. Then Brenda again, harsher, more mocking. Then Hayes, curt and dismissive. "Take 31B or leave the plane." At the 90-second mark, someone in PR couldn't hold it in. "My God, they actually spoke to you like that." Daniel rested his hand on the table, holding back his own rising anger. "I was standing outside the airport gate when I heard what happened. I knew it was bad." He looked at Lauren. "But hearing it with my own ears, it is worse." Lauren said nothing. She let the recording play to the end. When the final sound faded, silence gripped the room so tight it felt like the walls themselves were listening. No one moved. No one dared breathe too deeply. When the waveform disappeared from the screen, Lauren looked around the table. Her eyes were not red, not shaken, not angry. They held the most dangerous expression of all the calm of someone who had decided she would not back down even a single inch. Finally she spoke. "I want everyone's assessment." The first to respond was the head of legal, a woman usually unshakably composed in the face of legal battles, though now her hands trembled slightly. "Lauren, this recording is a weapon. I am not exaggerating. This is evidence that cannot be twisted, cannot be denied, cannot be reframed. If we release it, North Star Airlines will not just lose, they will face serious legal consequences. Brenda will lose every angle of defense. Hayes will face disciplinary investigation. And Daily Raw will be forced to issue corrections or deal with lawsuits." The head of PR took a breath. "If we release it, it will make waves. Massive waves. But Lauren, you have to understand, it will also burn every bridge with North Star. There will be no future partnership. They will retaliate. The press will swarm. Next week could become the most chaotic week in our brand's history." Lauren looked at her, neither cold nor indifferent, simply observant. "You are speaking as if I still want a partnership with them." The PR chief fell silent. Daniel lifted a report. I ran a preliminary analysis. If we release the evidence, the reaction will follow this sequence. 1, the media will be shocked. 2, public opinion will shift almost instantly. 3, Brenda's union will withdraw its support. 4, North Star will be forced to hold a press conference and apologize. 5, their stock price will plunge. 6, Lauren's reputation will be restored, possibly even strengthened. Lauren nodded once. Risks. Daniel met her eyes. You will be hated by people who do not want to believe the truth. You will become a symbol. And once you become a symbol, you will never have a quiet life again. The room waited for her answer, But Lauren did not speak immediately. She stood, walked to the large glass window, overlooking the glowing grid of Boston below. The skyscrapers glittered like shards of glass, reflecting a simple truth: the city did not care who was right or wrong. It cared only about who spoke loudest. The scene outside mirrored her own reflection, a woman standing at the crossroads between fight and surrender. But Lauren had never been the type to choose surrender. Yesterday, Lauren said, slowly still facing the window, the media painted me as a monster. They said I abused my power. They said I ruined people's lives over a minor mistake. Her voice dropped soft yet sharper than before. But they never asked who ruined my day, who forced me out of the seat I paid for, who told me I didn't belong there. She turned her dark eyes, blazing with steel fresh from the forge, and they never imagined I had a voice. The silence in the room swelled. Lauren walked back to the table and placed her hands on the wood. "We are holding a press conference." One of the PR team members stiffened. "Right now, tomorrow, or the weekend. In 48 hours, Lauren answered. Daniel nodded. "I'll arrange everything." Lauren continued. "I want Ben Carter present. I want major outlets. I want cameras live, broadcast, no editing. And I want a large screen behind me." Daniel asked, "For what?" Lauren gave a thin, deliberate smile, not one of joy, but of someone who had chosen to fire the first shot, to play the entire recording. The room vibrated with shock. A PR member whispered, voice trembling, "Lauren, you are about to destroy Brenda's career. Are you sure you want to do that?" Lauren looked straight at her. "She destroyed her own career the moment she called me sweetheart and refused to check my ticket. I am simply replaying the film she wrote." No one said another word. In the charged stillness, Lauren felt her heart settle into a familiar place, the place of a leader, a fighter, someone who refused to let herself be twisted into the villain of another person's story. Daniel rose. "Lauren," he said quietly, his voice deep as the night wind, "I've worked with you for years, but I've never seen you like this." Lauren looked at him, narrowing her eyes slightly. Like what Daniel replied, exactly like the kind of person the world should never have provoked. Lauren paused, then spoke, not because of power, not because of reputation, but for everyone who was ever like me, everyone who was told they did not belong in a place they worked their entire lives to reach. In that moment, everyone in the room understood Lauren was not merely seeking revenge. She was rewriting the narrative others tried to force her into. She closed her laptop and stood. "We have 48 hours to prepare. This is not a reaction. This is retaliation." She walked to the door. Before opening it, she paused for half a second and said, without turning back, "And during that press conference, I want one question asked of them." Daniel replied, "What question?" Lauren said, "Whether they still think I don't belong in first class when I am standing on that stage." The door opened. She stepped out. The entire room watched her leave, and they knew that from this moment forward, the world would never be the same. 2 days before the press conference, America felt like it was holding its breath inside an unnatural stillness. Not the quiet of peace, but the heavy silence that settles right before a storm so violent it tears the sky open. Every newsroom, every reporter, every television anchor could smell the tension. A CEO under attack, an airline trembling, a media war between truth and lies about to erupt. And at the center of that storm, Lauren Whitfield remained completely silent. A silence that drove the entire press corps mad. On the morning of the conference, as sunlight poured over the glass panels of Whitfield Tech's headquarters like liquid gold, Lauren walked into her office, wearing a perfectly tailored deep navy suit, her face unreadable. Daniel followed close behind, iPad in hand, steps quick but steady. A nervous assistant rushed up with a schedule, but the moment Daniel raised an eyebrow, the assistant fell silent. Everyone understood that in the next 24 hours, every detail mattered, and nothing, absolutely nothing, should distract Lauren. On the 12th floor, the PR department had transformed into a crisis command center. Massive screens displayed real-time sentiment charts, live tweet feeds, tabloid article view counts, investor emails, and hundreds of hostile comments flooding in by the second. But mixed within those toxic lines, a new pattern had started to emerge, small sparks of doubt whispering through the mob. Something about this doesn't add up. Why won't the airline release the cockpit audio? I don't believe a CEO would lose control like that. Someone said they heard she was mistreated. Doubt small but growing, spreading like tiny flames across dry grass. But Lauren didn't look at the screens. She avoided every source of emotional noise. She had spent the previous day asleep, recovering, sharpening her focus. Today she was a soldier, stepping onto the battlefield, armed, and most importantly, carrying evidence. Meanwhile, across the city, Brenda Collins was living in hell. Her small apartment was swallowed in darkness, curtains pulled, tight lights off. The table was buried under empty water bottles, crumpled tissues, anxiety medication, and a phone that kept lighting up non-stop. But earlier, those notifications were not only messages. All day yesterday, reporters crowded her front door. They shouted her name, shoved microphones inches from her face. "Brenda, do you have anything to say about the discrimination allegations?" "Brenda, there are rumors the union is about to drop you." "Any comment, Brenda sources. Say the CEO has evidence. What's your response?" The microphones came so close they made her flinch. She hid behind the curtain, sobbing softly like a frightened child. Every knock on the door, even from a neighbor passing by, sent panic crashing through her chest. Her phone buzzed again. "Brenda, this is the union rep. We need to talk. Urgent. Another message, Brenda. If there is any evidence against you, we cannot protect you. Brenda, you need to tell us the truth." Brenda threw her phone aside and held her head. The truth. The truth was, she thought she had won. She thought Lauren was just another black passenger who didn't know her place. She thought she could provoke, belittle, humiliate. She never imagined someone might be recording everything. She let out a choking sob, her breathing ragged in the dark room. She had believed public pity would save her, but now her instincts dragged her into a cold abyss. Lauren had something big, something powerful enough to send North Star into a panic for the last 48 hours. And Brenda knew, with the raw intuition of a liar, Lauren was not silent because she was afraid. She was silent because she was getting ready to strike. Across town, Captain Hayes was not faring any better. He sat in a union meeting room, pale as if he had seen a ghost. 3 union representatives stared at him with stern, exhausted expressions. One pushed a laptop toward him. "This is serious, Hayes. There are rumors of a recording. If that is true, you are not just losing your job. You could lose your license." Hayes tried to defend himself. "I followed procedure. The manifest, clearly, a representative cut him off. The manifest does not replace actual verification. If the recording shows you failed to check her ticket, failed to confirm her information, failed to handle the situation. Objectively, we cannot help you." Hayes swallowed hard. His hands were shaking. Sweat dampened his palms. In his mind, Lauren's words at the airport echoed, "Fairness is what you denied me." He had thought she was just angry. Now he understood she had been telling the truth. On the morning of the press conference, the city ignited into a media frenzy. Television trucks lined the street outside Whitfield Tech. Reporters crowded the sidewalks. Hundreds of people held up phones to live stream. Major newspapers, minor blogs, investigative YouTubers all converged, as if this were the trial of the century. No one knew what Lauren would say. But everyone knew she had something strong enough to shake North Star Airlines to its core. Inside the building, Lauren stood before a mirror, a rare moment of stillness. She looked at herself not with arrogance, but with the awareness of someone who understood that what she was about to do would change the way the world saw her forever. Her breath slowed. Her fingers adjusted the edge of her suit, her hair sleek, her eyes sharp, not a detail out of place, not a hint of weakness. The door opened. Daniel stepped inside. "Lauren," he said softly, "the press is in place. The room is ready. Ben Carter is seated in the second row. The audio has been checked." Lauren turned. Any response from North Star Daniel inhaled. Complete silence. "Which means they know they've lost, Lauren," replied her smile, thin as a blade. The two walked down the grand hallway toward the press auditorium. Staff stepped aside. Some stood tall and nodded to her like soldiers saluting their general. They were not just looking at a CEO. They were looking at a woman about to fight for a truth every one of them felt connected to. The auditorium doors opened. Camera lights swept across her like 1,000 eyes. Camera shutters clicked in rapid bursts. Reporters pressed forward microphones, jutting out like a forest of spears. In the front row sat a reporter from Daily Raw, clutching a notebook. Lips tight, not confident like before, but tense, frightened and pale. Lauren walked toward the stage, each step landing like a slow drumbeat of victory. When she sat in the prepared chair, the room fell silent, as if someone had pulled every sound out of the air. Daniel stood behind her eyes, alert. Ben Carter, sitting in the second row, gave her a small nod, the nod of someone who knew he was about to witness something that would change a company's history. Lauren lifted the microphone. In that moment, it felt as though all of America leaned toward her. For the past 7 days, Lauren began her voice steady and resonant. "A story has been written about me. A story many have believed because it fits the prejudice they want to believe." She paused. "But today I am not here to tell a different story. I am here to show you the truth." The room tightened with anticipation. Lauren gave Daniel a small nod. "The signal?" Daniel pressed a button. The screen behind her lit up. Blue waveforms appeared. And then Brenda's voice filled the auditorium, sharp, mocking, undeniable, "Sweetheart, you do not look like you belong up here." The entire room detonated, not with noise, but with a silence so deep and devastating it crushed every lie spoken in the last week. Lauren set the microphone down, sat tall, and swept her gaze across the room. The war had turned, and what came next would be far more ruthless. When Brenda's first sentence echoed through the auditorium, it did not sound like a voice. It sounded like a bullet. A slow-moving bullet that ripped straight through the silence and warped the entire room on impact. Reporters in the front row leaned forward, as if they had just heard the impossible. Some blinked rapidly. A few jolted, gripping their cameras until their knuckles turned white. But the rest, the majority, went still, frozen, as though the universe had suddenly shifted its axis. Lauren said nothing. She let the recording tell the story on its own, and that story was brutal, unfiltered and unforgiving. Brenda's voice kept pouring through the speakers so vivid that the audience could almost smell the cheap perfume she had worn that day. "People like you don't usually sit here. Economy is in the back. Don't make this difficult." Brenda's voice was laced with superiority, the kind of confidence held by someone who believed she was the one in control. But in the auditorium, her voice had become evidence. Not vague evidence, but sharp, merciless, irrefutable evidence. Then Lauren's voice emerged completely opposite, polite, tired but composed. No insults, no raised tone, no, "Do you know who I am? No, I am richer than you." Only patience, a patience Lauren would never have needed if the world had been fairer. And then came Captain Hayes, his tone brittle, irritated, and utterly devoid of verification. "We don't have time for this. Move or get off the plane." No one in the room could maintain a neutral expression after hearing that. Several reporters exchanged stunned looks. One whispered, "My God, they really did this." Another choked out. They said she screamed, but here she is, completely calm. A blonde journalist in the back covered her mouth, eyes wide, and in the front row, the Daily Roar reporter who had authored the hit piece slid lower in her seat, her spine collapsing her face, turning paper white, her hands trembling so badly she could not even type. Lauren did not look at them. She kept her eyes on the screen, watching her past self in that moment, not to relive it, but to reclaim something she had fought her entire life for, the right to not have her truth twisted until even she began doubting her own memory. This recording returned that truth to her without condition. When the audio reached the moment, Hayes ordered her to seat 31B. A wave of noise rippled across the auditorium. One reporter burst out, "That is coercion. This is forced displacement of a passenger." Another slammed his palm onto the table. "This is not a seat mix-up. This is blatant bias." A national news correspondent was breathing fast. "We printed the wrong story, oh my God." Lauren sat still, hands folded gently on her knee, her eyes steady. She was not angry. She did not cry. She did not breathe harder. She was not triumphant. She simply sat in the absolute calm of someone who knew without question that she was standing inside the truth. When the recording ended, Lauren lifted her hand and pressed stop. The auditorium fell into a heavy silence, the kind that lingers after a bomb detonates, and the dust is still floating in the air. No coughing, no camera shutters, no chairs shifting. Only the faint hum of the ventilation system and the sound of hundreds of heartbeats rising together. Lauren lifted the microphone. Her voice did not need to rise. It needed only the clarity the truth demands. "This is the truth," she said. Not the story they wrote. Not the version they wanted the public to believe. This is the real voice. This is the real behavior. This is how I was treated, not because my ticket was wrong, not because the system failed, but because I did not look like someone who belonged in that seat. A reporter shot up from his chair. "Dr. Whitfield, why didn't you release this evidence sooner?" Lauren looked directly at him. "Because I wanted them to say every lie they had. I wanted them to build their own story. I wanted them to push the button that destroyed their credibility before I showed the truth." Pens scratched violently against paper. Cameras flashed. A voice called out, "Are you saying the airline knew about this?" Lauren answered instantly. They knew. From the moment I stepped off that plane, they chose silence. Another reporter raised a hand. In the recording, you never shout, never insult, never use your influence. Would you like to respond to Daily Raw's claim that you screamed, berated, and threatened the staff? Lauren tilted her head. My only response is the sound you just heard. If that is what they call screaming, then we need to rewrite the dictionary. The room erupted into a nervous, stunned laughter. Not joy. Shock. A journalist in the back, Ro's voice, trembling so they lied. Completely, Lauren lowered the microphone, placed both hands on the table, and leaned forward slightly. Not just lied, she said. They fabricated. They put words in my mouth I never said. They turned me into a villain because I fit the narrative they wanted to sell. Then she straightened her voice, lowering but sharpening like metal. And today I am handing that narrative back to them unchanged, but corrected by the truth. From the second row, Ben Carter stood. No one had asked him to speak. No script had been prepared. But he knew this was the moment he could not stay silent. I am the one who recorded it, he said loudly. Every camera whipped toward him. I witnessed everything. I saw how she was treated. I saw the bias, the discrimination. He drew a deep breath, and I recorded it because I knew stories like this are rarely believed unless there is proof. Lauren looked at Ben with quiet gratitude. Not gratitude for saving her, but gratitude for standing beside her. Ben nodded, as if to say, "You were never alone." Then the Daily Raw reporter rose, the one who had written the attack piece. Every eye in the room swung toward her. Sweat glistened on her forehead. Her voice shook. Dr. Whitfield, I, Lauren, faced her calmly. No hatred, no anger, just presence. What do you want to say? Perhaps we were not given complete information. Lauren tilted her head. Information or truth? The reporter froze. The entire room heard the click in her throat as she swallowed. Lauren did not humiliate her. She did not need to. The truth had already done the job. She lowered her microphone and spoke the most important line of the entire conference. Today is not about punishing anyone. Today is about proving one thing: no one has the right to steal another person's voice, especially through prejudice. 1 second. 2, 3. Then the room exploded. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Phones rang. Tweets flew at breakneck speed. The media collapsed and resurrected itself all at once. The truth, slow and underestimated, blazed across the country like wildfire, and that fire was spreading faster than any lie ever could. Meanwhile, not far away, Brenda watched the live stream from her dark apartment, her hands trembling violently. When her own voice echoed from the screen, followed by her own mocking laugh, she clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. The whole world was listening. The whole world was watching. And the whole world now understood who the real victim was. Brenda slid to the floor, sobbing, "It's over, I'm finished." In a union meeting room across the city, Captain Hayes stood frozen as his own voice played through a speaker. "We don't have time for this." One representative turned to him and said flatly, "You are done, Hayes." But this was only the beginning. The destructive force of truth was about to spill out of that conference room and sweep across the entire aviation industry. And Lauren, standing in the heart of the storm, knew one thing: the battle was won. But the war ahead would be far bigger. When the recording ended, It felt as if the air in the auditorium was still vibrating, as if the sound refused to leave the walls, the ceiling, or the floor. Brenda's voice, her resentment that poisoned Sweetheart Hayes's orders, all of it still haunted the space like ghosts unwilling to disperse. But once truth is exposed, it does not need to repeat itself to exert pressure. It shifts the world on its own. Only minutes after the audio appeared on the screen, a media earthquake began tearing across America, fast, violent, and irreversible. NBC was the first to break into its programming with breaking news: a black CEO, smeared by airline staff recording just released. CNN followed immediately. Shocking audio reveals blatant discriminatory conduct by flight attendant. Even Fox News jumped in North Star Airlines controversy, clear signs of systemic bias. Twitter, now called X, erupted like a nuclear blast. New hashtags appeared and instantly climbed to the top 3 nationwide. Number 1, number 2, number 3. I stand with Lauren of North Star shame. Let the truth speak. And the words once used to attack Lauren now boomeranged straight back at Brenda. Brenda is the one abusing power. Victim, no. This is the villain. Fire her immediately. She should never be allowed near another passenger again. Major influencers who had remained silent earlier now posted videos, live streams, and breakdowns of every sentence from the audio. Some even cried, listening to how Lauren was treated. A black woman that calm, and they called her aggressive. This is blatant prejudice. She endured too much. I cannot believe anyone could remain that composed. The truth, rare and fragile, had in that moment become Lauren's most powerful weapon. But if the media had turned into a tidal wave, then North Star Airlines had become a decaying ship being ripped apart by the sea. Inside North Star headquarters, chaos reigned. In the boardroom, the airline's CEO, Jonathan Reaver-Hare, disheveled and Silver slammed a stack of papers onto the table. Who let this happen? Why did no one tell me there might be a recording? An HR director stuttered. We thought it was only a rumor. Jonathan roared. Rumor, it is evidence. Evidence clear as daylight. Another executive spoke nervously. The media is calling. Shareholders are calling. Regulators are calling. The union is calling. We need a press conference. Jonathan snapped. A press conference for what we messed up from the start. Then the speakerphone lit up. A board member's voice blasted through Jonathan. Our stock has dropped 18% in 45 minutes. Fix it now. Jonathan wiped sweat from his forehead. Face flushed red. I will handle it. We will announce Brenda and Hayes are terminated. Immediately. But it was too late. Because by the time he said it, millions had already watched Lauren's press conference live stream, and their outrage had turned into fire. As for Brenda Collins, she was trapped inside her worst nightmare. She was no longer a pitted victim. She had become the symbol of everything people despised: discrimination, arrogance, injustice. She looked at her phone and saw thousands of comments flooding in. You are a disgrace. You know exactly what you did. Pray Lauren doesn't sue you. I used to feel sorry for you. Now I feel sick. Brenda threw her phone aside, tears streaming, hands shaking violently. But the worst part was the knocking at the door. She knew instantly it was the press. This time no one brought flowers or tissues. They came for blood. Voices echoed from the hallway. Brenda Collins, do you want to comment on the recording? Brenda, what did you tell the tabloids? Brenda, do you realize you could be sued? Brenda covered her ears, crouched on the floor, shaking her head and crying. Every lie she told had now become a blade, cutting straight back at her. Captain Hayes was no better. In the Union office, when the recording was played for him, his skin turned ashen. "We don't have time for this." That sentence, played aloud, sounded like a death sentence. A union representative said coldly, "Do you realize what that means? Do you realize you violated safety protocol? This isn't a small mistake. This is a serious breach." "You are finished, Hayes." Hayes slumped in his chair, hands shaking uncontrollably. 30 years of career gone in 12 minutes of audio. No one could save him. No one wanted to, because he had dug his own grave. National media had no choice but to label his actions a severe command failure. Law firms began preparing class action lawsuits. Other passengers who had faced discrimination started speaking out, saying they had encountered Brenda before, had been ignored by Hayes before. A full-scale investigation was launched. And then there was Garrett Miller, the man who stayed silent so he could enjoy seat 1A. He did not escape either. The pharmaceutical company he worked for called him into a meeting that very afternoon. Printed on the table were the statements he had given to the tabloids, claiming Lauren was aggressive, and screamed at the crew. His supervisor asked, "Did you verify anything before giving this quote?" Garrett trembled. I did not know someone recorded it." His supervisor replied coldly, "So you lied because you thought no one would find out Garrett was terminated on the spot." And when he stepped outside, dozens of phones pointed at him. "Did you lie to protect yourself? Are you biased?" Garrett covered his face and ran. The domino effect spared no one. Yet, in the midst of all the chaos, Lauren did not pop champagne. She did not smile. She did not gloat. After the press conference, Daniel asked her, "Do you feel relieved?" Lauren shook her head lightly. "This is not victory." "Then what is it?" "It is justice, stepping into the light." Justice does not feel happy. It only feels right. Over the next several hours, article after article rewrote the story, retracting earlier claims, issuing public apologies. Daily Roar, the tabloid that fabricated the original narrative, published a long correction, but the public did not forgive easily. Thousands commented, "Why did you not wait for the truth? You cared about clicks more than accuracy." National media shifted tone from labeling Lauren an aggressive, powerful CEO to a woman wronged but standing strong. Editorials appeared. A lesson for the entire media industry. Truth wins when we let it be heard. Lauren Whitfield, a symbol against discrimination. But Lauren watched silently. Praise did not move her. Apologies did not soothe her. The pain she endured did not disappear just because the public switched sides. That evening, Lauren sat alone in her dim office, looking out at the blinking lights of the city below. Daniel stood by the window watching her. "What are you thinking?" Lauren exhaled slowly. "That truth has a price." "How high?" Daniel asked quietly. Lauren looked out at the distant skyline, her eyes reflecting the glow of the city. "High enough that the world turns its back before it finally turns around." Daniel said nothing. He understood. Lauren had not won because she wanted victory. She had won because she refused to let people like Brenda define her. She had won because countless people before her had lost the same battle, smeared, silenced, transformed into villains in someone else's story. But Lauren was not the kind of woman who stayed silent. In another part of North Star's headquarters, Jonathan Reaver was now standing before a national television camera, face pale as chalk, preparing to deliver a scripted apology. In his statement, he would say, "We apologize to Dr. Lauren Whitfield and pledge to make changes. But that voice, the voice of someone forced to kneel, convinced no one. As for Lauren, she was preparing for the next stage, not personal revenge, but the transformation of her pain into something greater, a shield, a movement, a policy that would protect others after her, a foundation for how the aviation industry must treat its passengers. Lauren was not seeking triumph. She was seeking change, and she knew true change begins only after the war. Next, the aviation industry, the entire system was about to face Lauren Whitfield. After a 3-day media earthquake, America felt as if it was standing inside a strange new dawn. Everything looked the same. The lights still glowed across the city. The streets were still busy. People still moved through their routines. But something in the collective consciousness had shifted off its axis. This was no longer just another scandal or another headline. This was a cultural turning point, a moment when truth finally rose to the surface. Lauren stood in her office on the morning of the 4th day, the day she knew the small history of the aviation industry was about to change. She wore a simple white button-down shirt and black slacks, no jewelry, and no armor of a power blazer. She did not look like a multi-million-dollar CEO, but rather like a professor, preparing for the most important lecture of her life. Daniel stood by the door holding a stack of documents. He said, "Lauren." They signed. Lauren turned. The board accepted every provision. Daniel nodded, still carrying the faint disbelief of someone who had personally been in the negotiating room. Not just the board, the entire North Star executive team approved it. He placed the documents on her desk. They had no other choice. Lauren walked over, opened the folder and flipped to the first page. The title stood bold and clear: The Air Travel Dignity Accord. A 28-page document, every paragraph a change to the system. She read each point slowly. All North Star crew members must complete unconscious bias and anti-discrimination (POTA) training. Any flight attendant or pilot with 2 violations will have their credentials permanently revoked. Passengers may request full recorded documentation of any dispute. All investigations must involve an independent third party. No more internal self-review. All previously dismissed discrimination cases must be reopened. North Star will contribute $12 million to the Victims of Discrimination Support Fund, founded by Lauren. Lauren exhaled, not with relief, but like someone finally setting down a weight she had carried too long. "How many airlines want to join?" she asked. Daniel checked his iPad. As of 8 o'clock this morning, 8 domestic carriers and 3 international ones. And the number is rising every hour. Lauren nodded lightly. Good. Outside, the morning wind tugged gently at the curtains. Sunlight poured through the glass and warmed the walls. Lauren looked down at the city below, at thousands of people moving through their day. And she knew that somewhere among them were passengers who, for the first time, would not be asked, "Are you sure this ticket is yours?" People who would not have to prepare a script to justify their own presence. People who would not have to fear someone deciding their worth based on a glance. A soft knock sounded at the office door. A secretary stepped in. "Lauren North Star wants to meet you. Right now, 46th floor. They have arrived." Daniel looked at Lauren. "Do you want to meet them? They are not the easiest people to talk to." Lauren smiled a small but razor-sharp curve. "We are not here for what is easy. We are here for what is right." The meeting room on the 46th floor was vast, surrounded by glass, the kind of view that made a person dizzy if they stared too long. When Lauren and Daniel entered, the entire North Star Executive Board was already present. CEO Jonathan Reaver stood up, hands clasped in front of him, like a student about to apologize to his teacher. Beside him stood the HR director, the chief operating officer, and the head of cabin crew operations. No one spoke. Everyone waited for Lauren. Finally, Jonathan stepped forward. Dr. Whitfield. He began, voice hoarse, from 3 sleepless nights. I have no excuse. What happened was not just a mistake. It was a systemic failure. Lauren nodded once, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. Jonathan swallowed hard. We accept every term, every demand, every commitment. And I want to say this. He inhaled. You are not just a victim. You are the person who forced us to confront our own rot. Lauren tilted her head slightly. No, I didn't save you. The entire room froze. I simply made you face the truth you spent years ignoring. No one argued. If only Brenda and Hayes could have heard those words. Instead, they were in 2 different corners of the country, receiving their final disciplinary notices. Hayes would lose his license permanently. Brenda would be banned from aviation for life. And the latest internal investigation revealed Brenda had deliberately moved black passengers to the back rows on 3 other flights. Lauren did not feel joy reading that. No satisfaction. No triumph. Only a deep, tired ache, the kind that makes a person ask, why was it my responsibility to expose this? Why does the truth always land on the shoulders of a woman when an entire system stayed silent for years? The signing concluded after more than an hour. Jonathan extended his hand. Lauren did not accept it immediately. She studied him as if weighing sincerity on a scale only she could see. After 3 long seconds, she reached out. It was not the handshake of winner and loser. It was the handshake between someone who demanded change and someone who had no choice but to change. When Lauren and Daniel stepped into the bright hallway, Daniel let out a long breath. So that's it. Lauren shook her head. No, this is only the beginning. And she was right. That very afternoon, multiple airlines called Whitfield Tech, requesting guidance on implementing the new policy. Civil rights organizations contacted Lauren, inviting her to speak at national conferences. A senator from the state of Massachusetts emailed to request her help as a federal advisor on discrimination policy in public services. An Ivy League university invited her to deliver a keynote on leadership and dignity. Lauren read them, then set the phone down. She had not decided. Not because she did not want to speak, but because she understood something deeper. Every speech, every conference, every interview would turn her into a symbol. And becoming a symbol meant giving up privacy forever. Her entire life, she had fought to be seen as a person, not a representation. But now she could be the voice someone else needed. Lauren stepped out onto the building's balcony. The wind swept through her neatly tied hair. The city pulsed below, bright, loud, alive. But Lauren stood still, a solitary pillar in a world just recovering from a storm. Daniel stood behind her. You changed everything. Lauren did not turn. No, I only opened the door. And what lies behind that door? Daniel asked. Lauren looked down at the moving crowds, ordinary people living ordinary lives, a world where people do not have to prove they deserve respect. The wind strengthened, tugging at the edge of her shirt. Daniel watched her for a long moment, then said softly, You know, Lauren, most people fight back because they want to win. But you fight back because you want everyone to win. Lauren let out a quiet laugh. Maybe. Then she looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow across all of Boston. But honestly, I fought back for one simple reason. Daniel asked. What reason? Lauren answered, in a low, resonant voice filled with weight and clarity. Because no one has the right to tell me I do not belong in a place I earned with my own hands. In that moment, Daniel knew this story would go farther than headlines. It would enter leadership courses. It would appear in books. It would be told to young black girls afraid to walk into their first boardroom. Not as a revenge story, but as a reminder that dignity is not a privilege. It is a right, and it is never negotiable. Night fell. The city lit up. And on the 50th floor of Whitfield Tech, Lauren stood alone, staring at the lights like stars. There was no humiliation left on her shoulders, no other voice crowding her narrative, no one deciding her worth. She had reclaimed her voice and given it to millions more. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and modern power dynamics, Lauren Whitfield's story reminds us of a truth that never grows old when systems built on prejudice are forced to confront the truth. They do not simply tremble, they are forced to change. Justice in this world rarely arrives through loud strikes. It comes from persistence, from choosing to stand when others expect your silence, from turning personal humiliation into a shield for millions who cannot speak for themselves. Lauren did not win because she held power. She won because she refused to let anyone take away the dignity she earned with her own 2 feet. If this story moved, you hit like and subscribe so we can continue telling journeys where truth is not distorted, where those underestimated rise to reclaim their voice. And leave a comment with the phrase, "Hold your dignity," to remind each other that sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to speak to change an entire system.